Ahmed, you spend an enormous amount of time breaking down Project 2025. Now, for the last few months, the Trump administration has been aggressively trying to distance themselves from this plan. And to be honest, we haven't heard much about it for, I would say, the last month or two. So where do things stand?
So where things stand is he tried to claim, he posted something like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about Project 2025's demise when Paul Dan stepped down. But it is very much still active. They're still training, recruiting loyalists. And until
what does that mean for people who have forgotten?
So,
educate us.
Great. I'd be happy to talk about this because I feel like it needs more attention. Well, the Project 2025 movement has essentially been recruiting tens of thousands of just Trump loyalists across the country, right? They've been basically gaslighting them with these training videos. And ProPublica did a great report exposing all of these videos. I wrote about it in my newsletter. And essentially, they're prepping a quote, this is their terminology, army of MAGA loyalists to install once Trump re-implements Schedule F, this executive order that he attempted at the end of his last term. But he wants to purge tens of thousands of civil servants. And no one, he's not getting pressed on that, but we pressed Kamala for specifics. But that point aside for later, he is planning to purge these truly objective, nonpartisan civil servants that just administer government services. What is that going to do to our country, right? And that's still happening, and the agenda directly aligns with Trump's Agenda 47. So they may say Project 2025 isn't active anymore, but it is alive in Trump's agenda.
And if you go to the website, because I did a YouTube series on Project 2025, and then I went to the website yesterday just out of curiosity. It's still up. It has a disclaimer. Donald Trump knows nothing about Project 2025. And then it says,
okay,
you want to join...
I highly doubt he's actually been on the website.
Right, well, that's true. But then it's like, if you want to join and our army, sign up. So there's still...
So this started years ago, even before Project 2025 grew up. As soon as Trump got out of office, Steve Bannon went and talked to a bunch of alumni of the Trump administration, and he said to them, "We need to build shock troops." His words, shock troops, to come into the government and change it in our view. And you've seen that outgrowth in Project 2025, in Trump's official Agenda 47. I mean, to your point, he can say as much as he wants. We're not doing Project 2025, but it aligns very well with his actual campaign agenda. There may be some nuanced differences, but we know what Donald Trump wants to do. It's not like there's some shock here. He's told us what he wants to do.
Yet there are still many Trump supporters who, when you ask them about some extreme elements of his campaign, or even the basic things he's talking about when it comes to his economic agenda, they say, oh, he doesn't mean that. Why is that? Why do they think that? Because there's no evidence that he's not going to follow through with it.
I mean, I think that there is a particular kind of malignant charisma that Donald Trump possesses, in which people see, he can say something and they do not see him as a vector of danger. And that is, the part of the fundamental paradox, at the heart of Trumpism. Even for people who would be vulnerable to the things that he says, they don't connect it to him actually doing it to them. On one other point on this is that, you two have history in the DMV. I went to school in D.C. You know hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people who are loyal government employees. They build their careers there. They take pride in serving various administrations with equal degrees of commitment and loyalty. And to purge all of those people in place of loyalists, you then get into the condition of actually creating a deep state. You're not removing a deep state, you are creating one. And what happens when you get to the next presidential administration? You have to then purge people who have, the point is that there's supposed to be know-how that carries over fundamental competence from one administration to the next.
On behalf of my mother, a 30-year...
Molly's turn.
We also have just had 2 hurricanes, and part of this 2025 is to get rid of NOAA, this national weather. And you really need this, especially right now, and also FEMA. They come after FEMA. Like, the whole goal here is to make the federal government so small you can drown in a bathtub.
Exactly. And I want to add to this here, just because when you're talking about whether or not people believe he will do it, well, the Supreme Court just enabled him with their immunity ruling to do basically whatever he wants if it's an official act. If we think, oh, maybe technically he might not be able to actually go after NOAA, or maybe he won't go after the Department of Justice or the Department of Education, actually, and dismantle it, we have seen time and time again that the most important checks on a president's power are the guardrails of their own character. That's it. Because if you can straight up go in there with the Supreme Court empowering you, you can do all of these things that he has outlined in his plans.
John, I'm hiding under my seat, almost crying, so you go.
Super uplifting.
I just want to thank Jelani on behalf of my mother, who worked in the federal government as a civil servant for 30 years, for raising up the people who do serve those different administrations. You know, for her, George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and you know, and on and on, and Obama. And then retired shortly into the Trump administration. There are those civil servants who go to work every day trying to serve their fellow citizens and not a particular president or party.
Right, exactly.
And there are tens of thousands of them. I mean, it's a big group of people.
So what do you think? They have less than 30 days to go. What do you think, both of them, what do the two of them need to do to try to win this thing?
It's a great question. I think, you know, look, for Trump, the answer is he's going to do exactly what he has been doing, which is trying to get out every single
But he's
Trump
also,
supporter.
right, he's doing events in New York and California. He's not going to win those states.
Well, he still needs to raise money, which is what I think. Right? Going to California, look, I think he wants to go to Madison Square Garden, be center of attention.
I 100% agree.
It's like an
I think
opportunity.
I think going to Madison Square Garden is more like a personal fantasy than like a strategic campaign.
He thinks he's Billy Joel, but
There is an easy piece. I have a column in the Chamber comparing whatever he does in Madison Square Garden to that 1939 fascist rally that happened in Madison Square Garden. So it's like right there. It's like that's not going to play. We're not thinking about the Knicks. You know, we're thinking about the Bund.
For
Damn.
Harris, though, I think she still needs to make the sale to some people. I think that, look, she didn't come into this race in the normal way, obviously.
Right.
And typically what you do as a candidate, the first thing you should do when you sit down is figure out why you're running for president and what you're going to tell people about what you're going to deliver to them and why you're uniquely suited to do that. And she didn't have that opportunity, as most candidates would at the beginning of a campaign. She did in 2019. It didn't work. She didn't communicate it well. This time she's thrust into this position and has not yet made that full sale of, here's why you can trust me to deliver things on behalf of you. She says it.
So are you
but I
saying,
think she
listen,
still
so
needs to
she's
finish
offering
it.
tons of policy and policy details.
I'm not saying-
Hold on a second. But are you saying what's missing is the Obama vision? Is that what's missing?
No, what I'm saying is what's missing is this sort of, you used the term origin story before. Why is it that people should look at Kamala Harris? And by the way, I see people.
We've heard it. We've heard about the girl from Oakland. We know her story.
I'm thinking about a thin layer of voters that she still needs to convince in swing states, right? I'm not talking about the vast majority of the Democratic Party. Look, she raised her hand and said, I'm in, and 95% of the Democrats were with her, and 95% of them were happy to do it and excited to go out and vote.
And in the last 2 months, people gave her $1 billion.